This is Naples, originally a Greek colonial city, today one of the most thriving and vital of Italian cities, and a strange mixture of the old and the new. Much has been written of the city and of the beauties of the bay on which it stands, but words cannot express the natural beauty of surroundings, and so I came to Naples to see things for myself. Here is a city with a splendid waterfront running round the bay. On this promenade, the modern luxury hotels look out on an unsurpassed view. Climb to the top of one of these high buildings, and there unfolds a glorious panorama of the bay and the important harbor. In the opposite direction, one looks over a sea of rooftops and up towards the high hills which surround the landward side of the city. Naples has not the glorious buildings of some of the other Italian cities, but there are some. The church and colonnade of San Francesco di Paola, a ponderous neoclassical affair imitating the Roman Pantheon. The adjacent royal palace is a creation of the Spanish period and is impressive chiefly for its size and situation, perched above the harbor. The finest of the modern buildings is the post office. Typical of modern-day Italian architecture. Naples has many fine churches, all of which are worthy of a visit. One of the finest of these is the church of San Domenico Maggiore, with its splendid monument. This church, in the 14th century, became the fashionable one of the Neapolitan aristocracy. Some of these old buildings are difficult to find because they're hidden away in the labyrinth of narrow streets and byways. The main shopping thoroughfare is the Via Roma, off which lead innumerable narrow and congested streets. Fully to appreciate Naples, one has to penetrate into the central zone of the old city, an immense area of narrow streets and closely packed buildings unparalleled in Western Europe. But to those who know New York, there is something here reminiscent of her east side, probably accounted for by the enormous immigration of Italian people to the New World. The great church of San Caterina a Formiello, one of the best examples of Neapolitan Renaissance churches, stands beside the entrance to a wide market square. In this place, the visitor finds a colorful mixed market, where amid the noise of shouting and bartering salesfolk, the Neapolitan buys the Mediterranean fish, which is offered here in all its wide variety. In the market, one finds the ever-present chestnut and peanut stalls, and that which is common to every street corner, the shoeshine man. But it's not long before the visitor tires of the city. There is so much to see in the surrounding country, which is dominated by the great mountain of Vesuvius. This massive volcano has not been active for many years, though it is not yet extinct. Vesuvius is said to be connected underground with another volcano, La Solfatana, a few miles away. This is very active indeed. From the floor of the great crater, in many places only a few inches thick, live steam issues. Here and there are small open pools of bubbling hot mud and lava. At the foot of the surrounding hillsides, the steam issues at great pressure, hurling into the air a continuous stream of small stones and volcanic cinders. And up the steep mountain sides of the crater, pure white steam can be seen issuing on every hand. Close by are the ruins of the old Roman vapor baths, which are fed by live steam from the volcano. Leaving this somewhat awe-inspiring scene, I made my way to the nearby village of Campi Flegrei, meaning flaming fields, situated beside the Mediterranean. This is typical of the fishing villages of the area. Everywhere the people were hard at work. Outside the houses, groups of women were busily making different kinds of fishing nets. The produce market is beside the water's edge, and here everything is delivered by boat. In the center of the town are the ruins of an ancient temple which, due to volcanic action, has twice sunk beneath the waters and is now rising again. This whole countryside is volcanic, of which fact there are many evidences, such as Lake Averno, a one-time crater. But to return to Vesuvius. In the shadow of the great mountain, one finds the excavated ruins of what was once one of the world's most famous cities, Pompeii. For 2,000 years, this city lay buried deep under the ashes and cinders which followed the great eruption of Mount Vesuvius. This one-time city of 20,000 inhabitants has now been largely excavated and gives a very clear picture of life as it was lived in those far-off days. The old roadways, such as the main one of the city, the Via Vesuvius, are today as they were of old. In the center is the Forum and the Temple of Jupiter. Here the religious and popular festivals took place in the days of Augustus, and here the local elections took place. Nearby are the ruins of the Basilica. Opposite is the Temple of Apollo. Within the ruined temple is a perfect miniature statue of Apollo. One of the most extraordinary things about Pompeii is the perfect state of preservation of many of the fine marble carvings which are so astounding to a visitor when he realizes that they are over 2,000 years old. Leading from the Forum through a magnificent archway runs the Via Vesuvius. The traffic of Pompeii was, in the main, chariots. Often the roads were under water. Crossing places were by stepping stones, so spaced as to allow the passage of the chariot wheels. Even today, one can see the result of the wear of that traffic. By the roadsides, in a splendid state of preservation, there stand the drinking troughs of the chariot horses. Traffic signs existed even then, and the no-entry one was certainly more positive than those of our present day. Perhaps the most remarkable of all things in Pompeii is the state of preservation of stone inscriptions. Though a dead city, the visitor cannot help but feel that he is living in and looking upon the days of past splendors. In the streets are the shops, such as the wine shop, where the old pottery receptacles retain their original shape and form. The baker's shop, with its old grinding mills and ovens. And then, on every hand, the villas and houses of the nobility of the period, with their beautifully laid out courtyards and fountains. That in those times there were great artisans is evident on every side, for one can see innumerable fountains and decorative mosaic architecture. Even the excavated floors have retained their perfect color, symmetry and pattern, and the beauty of the mosaics is almost unbelievable. One of the finest courtyards is that of Casa dei Veti, one of the houses of the nobility of the day. Superb and symmetrical layout adorned by magnificent white marble statuettes. Here, under the walls of the colonnade, are beautiful murals, which, though aged during 2,000 years, still retain their lovely pastel shades. Among the most interesting of the ruins of Pompeii are the ancient hot spring baths of the 2nd century BC. Here again are splendid and well-preserved murals. These baths were a great social factor of the day. The large and more commonplace ones were for the servants of the nobility, whose own baths were of smaller and more intimate character. On the walls of many of the old buildings are preserved political slogans and advertisements of entertainments. Looking round, one is forcibly reminded that artistic appreciation of the good things of life were perhaps much more predominant then than they are in life today. Leaving Pompeii, with its evident reminders of the splendors of the past, the Italian visitor is suddenly brought back to the reality of present-day Italian life, where cities, towns and villages are overcrowded. Overpopulation is today Italy's greatest problem. Throughout the country, there is a vast mass of non-productive manpower. Despite such troublesome economic factors, life today in Italy remains as colorful as in the past. Crowded markets teeming with life, the abundance of agricultural produce, the cheaply produced necessities of everyday life are evident in the street markets of every place throughout the length and breadth of the land. There is, in point of fact, a certain naive simplicity about these places that appeals to every foreigner who visits them. I saw a shoemaker and his sons at work in the street with their goat tethered beside them. The goat is a treasured possession, and the family animal goes to work with the family. Busy little courtyards grace every country town, where every day one can see the peasant and his family, old and young, hard at work. Practical people who know how to conserve and make use of the simple products of their land. Except in the few big manufacturing centers, the artisans of country towns work with the same tools as have been used by their forebears for generations past. The cart maker plies his trade, oblivious to the existence of modern manufacturing methods. He is a hereditary artist, though possibly he doesn't know it. Walk through these villages, and if you peep behind the scenes, you may well see pictures which belong to biblical times. In a yard I saw men hard at work, using the most primitive of tools and equipment with which they were breaking hemp. I watched them beating the straw to clear it from the fiber. Hard, arduous work, by which they earn only the necessities of existence. Then I went on to the yard where the fiber is prepared for the making of ropes and cordage. Though primitive, the place was tidy and orderly. An old woman was burning the refuse in an outdoor oven. The village women were weighing the fiber. In a small stone shed in a dusty atmosphere, girls were hackling and combing the long silky fibers. I went on to the rope walk, a large open space in the center of the little town. And here again, with the most simple of mechanical devices, people were twisting and weaving the fiber into cord and ropes, which, despite the primitive methods, were of the most excellent and proved quality. And then into the surrounding country, where one quickly realizes that the Italian people are for the most part an agricultural nation. It was the autumn of the year, and I saw the extraordinary sight of the apple crop being stacked in long rows out of doors, where it is left for final ripening before packing. Then I saw that late autumn crop, the Japanese lotus fruit, being picked. From a distance, it looks for all the world like an orange. As in most rural enterprises, the whole family enter into the work. This was particularly evident in the yard where I saw the fruit being sorted and packed. And talking of oranges, Italy is a very important citrus-producing country, but, owing to its topography, this fruit is not grown in wide groves, but in the sheltered valleys of the mountains, where light wooden structures are built to protect the fruit from inclement weather. To the tourist, probably the most impressive of all scenery in the Naples district is the Sorrento coast, where from the high mountain road which runs along the precipitous coastline, the tiny cultivated terraces tumble steeply down towards the deep blue sea, where the white-walled houses and buildings of the coastal villages virtually glitter in the brilliant Mediterranean sunlight. I stood on the cliff top, looking down upon one of these little towns, A splendid scene, rather like a picture postcard. It seemed to beckon me to come down from the height and see what it had to offer. For a long time I stayed and looked upon the scene, looked over the rooftops of the old houses, dominating church with its dome, and then towards the sea and the little beach with its quaint fishing boats. I made my way down through narrow, winding streets and precipitous steps. From above, there had been little sign of activity, but now the main street came into view, throbbing with life. I turned aside into a quiet byway and looked for the moment at the ancient houses shaded by palm trees. These old buildings, perhaps hundreds of years old, seemed to lean against one another at every conceivable angle. My time was drawing short, and as I left the town I passed through the main square. Here the whole place was festooned with row upon row of newly made macaroni, drying in the southern sun. And then I made my way back by that beautiful Sorrento coast road, and that evening I took the boat and sailed away from Naples, and as I looked back over the bay, the last thing I saw was the dominating mountain cone of Vesuvius.